Protecting the American egg supply from the avian flu. Former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb argues that the best way to fight the ongoing threat is through biosecurity and vaccines. Dr. Scott Gottlieb joins us now. Scott, if I left this next line out, I don't know what, the world might end, might stop spinning. He is also a CNBC contributor, and he's on the boards of Illumina and Pfizer. How's that? Now I'm done.
Thank you.
What am I most scared of? My not being able to have scrambled eggs, or bird flu jumping and being a real threat to the next pandemic for humans? What am I worried about?
Yeah, look, I think you're most worried about the human health risk here. It appears that this virus has become endemic in North America. We're seeing the birds, the migratory birds and cows now pass it back and forth between different species. And so if this is, in fact, endemic in North America and it's a persistent threat that we're going to have to deal with, it just increases the chances that it can continue to evolve in ways and get into other species where it has more potential to evolve in ways that it could infect humans. We're not there yet. The risk is still remote. But as this continues to spread and as it gets into more mammals, that risk continues to increase.
You know, there is in hindsight, there's a whole group of individuals that think that regular immunity to COVID would have been a better way to approach things. As a result, I think that has people actually positing, let this spread, and chickens that have natural immunity are going to win out eventually. And this is something that Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I don't know how serious he is, but proposed allowing it to spread through the flocks. I would think if you're worried about jumping to humans, that would incubate a lot more viruses. That could possibly, one of them could possibly be the one that causes the next pandemic. It sounds a little frightening.
Yeah, certainly it could drive the potential for more mutations if you allow it to spread unchecked in the flocks. It's also, unfortunately impractical in other respects because immunity isn't necessarily inherited. So there's a lot of diversity, as you well know, in people's immune systems and how they respond to different pathogens. And just because you might be able to isolate one chicken in the U.S. domestic supply of 350 million chickens that seems impervious to this virus, thinking that you could take that chicken and selectively breed it and reconstitute the entire flock of over 300 million chickens from that single chicken or a handful of chickens that haven't succumbed to the virus, and they're going to pass down that trait. That's just not practical. There's no reason to believe that the immunity, if in fact they have some innate immunity, is going to be inherited. And remember, these chickens are inbred. They're bred specifically for their egg-laying abilities, and they have weakened immune systems as a consequence of that, so it's a trade-off. I think the best step we could take here is improved biosecurity in these farms, which the Secretary of Agriculture, Rollins, has proposed. She put forward a very comprehensive plan. And the other thing we should be thinking about is vaccinating the chickens. There's hesitation around that, not just from anti-vax groups, but more prominently from people who export chickens. We engage in a brisk business of exporting baby chicks around the world. And a lot of countries won't want to take our chicks if they're vaccinated because they worry that the vaccine itself isn't sterilizing, so you can get chickens with subclinical infection. They're still infected, but they don't show signs of infection in those flocks that we may export, and they could unwittingly be importing the chicks, so the infected chicks. And so there are ways to mitigate that. There are steps we could take. I think we should explore that more earnestly.
Did you tell us your 5 ways of what we should do? Did you go over? I was thinking of a bunch of different things when you were talking. That's pretty gross. So there could be an underlying undetectable infection of the virus itself, the bird flu virus itself, or something else in the chickens we're exporting.
Well, the vaccine itself reduces the likelihood of the chickens becoming infected, but what it does most prominently is reduces their chances of succumbing to the infection, so they don't get as sick, or they don't get sick from the virus. But they could still catch the virus and harbor the virus, and so countries would worry that they'd be carriers. Exactly.
I'm not even going to make. So we got to lock these chickens down now, and homeschool them, not let them go to class. What are we supposed to do to keep repeat what we did with the human population with chickens? You can't do that, can you, Scott?
No, the increased biosecurity.
What are we going to do?
Yeah, the increased biosecurity, and the Secretary of Agriculture outlined a lot of these steps, deals with things like, hosing down trucks and workers' boots and things like that, so people don't import the virus onto the farm. Also improving protections for water supplies that chickens drink from, so that wild birds don't poop in the water supply and spread the virus that way. We know that there's a potential that dander between farms can spread over short distances through the air and infect water supplies as well. And so there's ways in terms of the ventilation that you have in hen houses to reduce the likelihood that you're going to bring the virus in through that route, through the ventilation. So there's things you can do to improve the biosecurity on farms that could substantially reduce the likelihood of having outbreaks on those farms. And in fact, I think the steps that we're taking are having an impact. I think by and large the reason why the number of infections are down and egg prices are falling is because the North American flyways right now are quiescent. Birds aren't migrating, and you could see an increase in infections and outbreaks on farms as migratory birds start to go through those North American flyways. And so the reprieve that we have right now may be short-lived. It may be a little bit more durable because of the steps we've taken in recent weeks, but I think we'll start to see more outbreaks as birds start to migrate again.
You know a lot about birds, Dr. Gottlieb. For somebody who's a doctor.
We regulated this at FDA.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you because, when you're talking about measures for farms, that's agriculture. So where does, in terms of vaccinating birds, where does the FDA come in, and how does it work with, say, a Department of Agriculture to enforce policy, and how could anti-vaccine stances at Department of Health and Human Services, I don't want to say infect, but, shape how the FDA directs that?
Yeah, look, the FDA and the CDC certainly advise on this process, but because meat and poultry is regulated by USDA, and USDA maintains a separate entity that regulates vaccines used in those livestock, they largely regulate the vaccines and need to give permission for chicken breeders to deploy the vaccines. And so the ball's in their court when it comes to the vaccines. I don't think their hesitancy right now is from the backlash that you're going to get from anti-vaccine groups, although you're already seeing that online. I think the bigger hesitancy of agricultural officials are the export considerations and the industry as well. I think the industry has mixed feelings about deploying vaccines in the American livestock and American chickens because of that brisk export market. Remember, we raise about 10 billion broilers in the United States, and so there's about 350 million egg-laying hens, but there's 10 billion broilers that are raised in the United States for consumption, and some portion of those are exported. We don't slaughter them and consume them all here in the United States, and so there's a pretty good business in exporting actually live poultry.